Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting this debate, and indeed the sponsors who had supported me in this application. I'd also like to thank the WASPI campaign nationally, who I believe are well represented in the gallery and are involved in protests and demonstrations outside the palace in support of their legitimate claims.
Would the Honourable Gentleman give way?
I'll give way to my Honourable Friend.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Can I pay tribute to him for all the work he's done on this issue? He mentions there are a lot of WASPI campaigners here today in the gallery to listen to this debate. Does he think it would be an opportune time for the Minister to apologise for the crass remarks he made in Westminster Hall, that WASPI women could get modern apprenticeships?
I'm going to come on to some of the Minister's remarks in an earlier debate, but if you did want to take that opportunity, I'm sure the WASPI women would certainly welcome such an apology. It's simple, Madam Deputy Speaker, what we're asking for and what the campaign's asking for, and that is set out in the resolution before the House a non-means-tested bridging pension to some 38 million women, so that they don't have to live in poverty. Such a pension to be paid as a percentage of the full state pension and compensation offered over the period between aged 60 and the new state pension age.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman, and I congratulate him for getting this debate before Parliament. And I think we would all agree that this is an injustice that needs to be addressed. But would you agree that we have to also look at ways of how it could be funded? And I've discovered from the House of Commons Library that bringing forward the proposed increase in the pension age from 67 to 68, from 2037 to 2036, would in itself raise £7.5 billion approximately, which would go some considerable way to helping these women address the injustice that they face.
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for that intervention, and I do want to come a little later in my remarks to some of the proposals and how this injustice may be addressed. I'll give way to my right.
Can I congratulate my honourable friend in securing this debate? And can I say, would he agree with me that it is absolutely shocking and unacceptable that the WASPI campaigners have had to work so tirelessly to get absolutely no response from the government?
I completely agree with my right honourable friend, and we have debated this issue many times. I think maybe 29 or 30 times in this place and in the Westminster Hall. Indeed, over the past few months, we've been incredibly active. EDM 63 has 195 signatures. An e-petition that was laid before Parliament attracted 109,000 signatures. That number continues to grow, and we had an oversubscribed Westminster Hall debate where there were so many members present who were actually sitting on the window ledges. I'll give way to my honourable friend. Holton first.
Can I say so? Can I first of all congratulate my honourable friend on securing the debate and also on the tireless work he puts into on behalf of this cause. But I certainly support what WASPI is calling for the further transitional state pension arrangements for all WASPI women. But is it the case they've actually put forward developed a number of options for potential solutions to provide transitional arrangements for the women affected? And will he be coming to that point later in his speech?
Absolutely. I'm grateful for that intervention, and there are a number of options, and there are things that the Minister could do immediately to mitigate and alleviate the worst hardship that's being suffered currently. Indeed, it's a matter of concern across the whole House, and the EDM and the representations that have been made are from every nation, every region, every political party in this House. I'll give way to my right honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and he's making a good job of putting the case. But can I put to him the words of a retired teacher from Knowsley who says she was born in July 1954, and she says, and I quote, The boy I sat next to in school was born in November 1953. We left school at the same time and began to pay our national insurance and income tax at the same time, but he receives his state pension on his 65th birthday. I have to wait 10 months beyond my 65th birthday. How can that be fair, she says. Hasn't she summed it up very well?
Absolutely. I'm grateful for the intervention, and I'm sure every member in this House, on all sides of the House, have got many examples of WASPI women coming to surgeries, writing, sending emails. Daily, Madam Deputy Speaker, I receive heartbreaking letters from my own constituency and from further afield, emails from women who've been suffering extreme hardship. I'll give way to the...
Gentleman, and I'm very proud to be a co-signatory of the debate as well. Can I just point out, because so far he's just been referring to WASPI, and we know there is an awful lot of interest in this whole issue, and only some of the groups call themselves WASPI. What we're referring to is all those women born in the 1950s who are suffering from an injustice disproportionately inflicted on them through the changes to the pension qualification age.
Absolutely, and I welcome that intervention, and I acknowledge the contribution that the honourable gentleman's made to the campaign, and I do agree. I'm going to give way once more to my...
Thank him for giving way and for all the hard work that he has put in on this issue. I'm sure he, like myself, has come across a lot of women who are telling me stories about how they have based their whole retirement plans, and maybe their partner has already retired, based on what they were told and assumed would be their normal retirement age. And everyone just says it's just not fair.
Absolutely, completely agree with my honourable friend. Many of these women, Madam Deputy Speaker, have worked since they were 16. They signed up to a deal. They considered it to be an agreement with government, and that deal's been cast aside with little or no regard for their financial circumstances. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Grateful to him for giving way and for organising this debate. A moment ago, he used the word heartbreaking, and it genuinely is heartbreaking to listen to women, as I have in Dudley and the Black Country, who found themselves retiring early to care for a relative, in some cases their husband, subsequently found themselves widowed, and were left with no income coming in at all, facing the prospect of having to wait much longer for the pension on which they planned their whole future. Would you agree with me that particular attention has got to be given to women in that position?
Absolutely, and there are things that the Minister can do and the government can do immediately. What we are doing here is we're creating an unnecessary generation of women, many now relying on food banks, some of whom are forced to sell their homes and are being forced to rely on the benefit system. It's degrading. It's degrading for them. I'm going to get you in a moment, but I'm going to give way.
I thank my honourable comrade for giving way. Does he agree with me that the role of the trade union movement in supporting the WASPI women has to be praised? And can I tell him that the WASPI campaign in Glasgow North Lanarkshire are watching this debate live in the Glasgow City Unison office, one of whom is my constituent Cathy MacDonald, who has worked since she was 15 years of age for 48 years and is now having to work till she's 66 years of age.
Absolutely. You know, this is a huge injustice that affects all nations, all regions, all parts of the United Kingdom. These are hard-working, decent women who have contributed through the National Insurance Fund and had an anticipation of receiving their state pension. I'm going to give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I want to pay tribute to him for securing this debate and for all the work that he does on this issue and the WASPI campaign and others as well. Would he agree with me that what's happening to a lot of these women is that they're being very inappropriately dealt with by both the job centre and the benefit system? I had, and I'm sure my honourable friend will want to know this, I had a lady in my constituency surgery last week who's just been made redundant from Walker's Crisp factory. She's got a full employment record and contribution record, but she's really fearful about what's going to happen to her over the next few years, and she's going to be forced into inappropriate work. She doesn't know what benefit she's going to get. She's really stressed, and yet she's had this full record of contributions. And shouldn't she have proper transitional arrangements and not be treating women in this way?
Absolutely, and it's doubly relevant to me, Madam Deputy Speaker. Walker's Crisps in my constituency are closing this week, just before Christmas. 400 people losing their jobs. Many long-serving employees have worked hard, some in their late 50s and early 60s, with an anticipation of receiving their state pension. I'll give way to my honourable friend Farley.
I'm very grateful for my honourable friend and neighbour for giving way, and I take great pleasure in praising him for the work that he does on behalf of the WASPI women. But would my honourable friend agree with me that in the neighbouring town to his of Hartlepool, my constituency, 5,500 women have suffered due to the lack of action on this matter by this government, have been forced into food banks in some cases, and feel victimised in all of their cases?
Absolutely, and these women are disadvantaged in many ways, and often ways that maybe members don't realise. And issues that have been raised with me about free bus passes, living outside of London, people from the regions, from the northeast, from the southwest. Many of these women don't drive, so without free bus passes, I'll give way to the honourable lady.
I appreciate the honourable gentleman giving way. Could I ask him and other members on the seats opposite, how much fuss did they make when Gordon Brown brought this change in?
I think the issue that we need to address is where we are now. That there are two. Well, you've raised a suggestion. You've raised a question. Do we think it was wrong? And I think that the 1995 changes were incorrect. Please let me answer this, and then I'll take your intervention. But what happened in the 2011 Act is those changes, which were originally spread over a longer period, were expedited. I want to come to a quote from the former Pensions Minister, Steve Webb, who elaborates on this point. Well, I did indicate I'd give way to the honourable gentleman, but I want to take as many interventions as I can. Well, do you mind, because I did indicate, and then I will accept the Minister's intervention.
I thank the honourable member for giving well and commend him in his speech. Just to put in record and just to clarify, the 1995 Pension Act was put through by a Tory government, and the 2011 Pension Act was put through by a Tory Lib Dem coalition. So why she's referencing Gordon Brown's a mystery.
I'll give way to the Minister.
I'm most grateful to the honourable gentleman for letting me intervene, but he will be aware that in 2007, after 10 years of a Labour government, they actually did consider all matters of pensions legislation, and they did pass the 2007 Act, and they did have all consideration of all matters on this, so they had total capacity in the 13 years in power to do something that they now say that they were not appropriate to do. With respect, there is a legitimate thing to answer on this.
I think. Well, I will, but I just want to have an opportunity to respond to that. You know, what we need to do is recognise the injustice that these women face, and there were many missed opportunities. In the 2011 Act, accelerated the changes. There's no doubt about that. The former Pensions Minister Steve Webb is quoted extensively as indicating that was the case. And when he was writing out on behalf of the coalition government, the response he received from many WASPI women was that, or his comment was that, he was not only informing them of a change of 1 year that was brought about by the 2011 Act, but informing them for the first time about the earlier changes. So, in fact, their pension, state pension retirement age was being extended by 6 years in some cases. I'll give way to my own.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. As someone who was 1 year old when the 95 Act came into effect, but who's sitting here just like everybody else, can I say this to all members, that in this debate, can we get past the party political nonsense of whose fault it is? The point is, this mess has been going on for long enough. This is the government who is in charge just now. This problem has not went away, and it's this government that need to deal with it.
Absolutely, and there are things that the government could do immediately to mitigate for the worst cases of hardship. So, for example, and I'll get you in a moment, I know many members want to contribute and to place things on the record, but can I mention also the winter fuel allowance that can be worth up to £300? And if the minister's looking for suggestions, that would be a decent start for government to give the WASPI women this payment each year, and that would enable them to have some level of comfort during these cold winter weather where many are having to choose in my region between heating and eating. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman, and he's quite right to say that problems date all the way back from 95 and through 3 or more governments. So he's right to say that. But can I just ask him, does he agree that what a lot of my constituents feel, which is that actually this is much to do with communication as it is to do with policy? Many of my women who are affected said to me, if they'd known in time, and they'd known what the effects of the changes were, they would have been able to respond. Would you agree?
I think that's a completely reasonable point that the Honourable Gentleman makes, and I'm sure there's common cause on all sides of the House, and I'm looking at the Minister and hoping that common sense can prevail. I think there has to be an acknowledgement that there was poor communication, and I'm sure the Minister's aware there's a collective action that's being put forward by the WASPI women through Bindman solicitors, and there is a possibility, of course, that there could be a case of maladministration if it's found in their favour. I'll give way to the Honourable.
The constituents that have been to see me, and I've been listening carefully to what he says, and he seems to know what he's talking about. Could he give an idea of how much this will cost? Because I suspect there is a whole range of different amounts of money, but I'd be very curious to know what he thinks would be the right amount of money to go to some way of putting this right.
There are things that we could do immediately. I think there are things that the government and the minister could do immediately. I want to come to those a little later on. I've kind of set them out in a sequential way. There's suggestions about immediately extending pensions credit to the group. I don't have the costings for that. I mentioned extending 800 million. My front bench informs me from a sedentary position. There are things that could be done in relation to the winter fuel allowance, into bus passes, that would offer immediate help to these women. But can I say the fundamental point that the former Pensions Minister, Steve Webb, said that I alluded to a few moments ago, and it's in response as well to the Minister's intervention. And this is what he said. The 2011 Act, which he was responsible for as Pensions Minister, didn't add any more than 18 months to people's pension age. Typically, it added 12 months to their pensionable age. But when we did write to people, this is Steve Webb's words, we did write to them to tell them what changes we had made. This was the first time they'd heard about the first changes. So instead of me writing to them to tell them there was an extra year on the pension age, we were effectively telling them they had 6 extra years added to their pension age, which of course is why they're outraged. And we are kind of hopefully having a sensible and constructive and meaningful debate, but make no mistake, there's real hardship and real outrage out there. I'll give way to you.
For giving way, and he's setting out the case beautifully, and I should congratulate him on getting this debate organised. Can I say to him that, as someone who represents a retirement town, I've had many local constituents coming to me making this point. Most of them are taking a slightly different point of view, though. They are saying, look, they don't object to the principle of equalisation of pension age at all. In fact, they think it is just and it is right. But what they are upset about is they say they weren't properly advised and they didn't have time to plan early enough in their working careers. And that is the injustice which they're coming to me with most strongly.
Absolutely, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the honourable gentleman with typical alacrity has hit the nail right on the head. But there is nevertheless an injustice that needs to be rectified, and the party of government needs to do that. I'm going to give way just a couple more times, and I'm going to make a little more progress. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman, and then once more, then I'm going to press on with it.
For giving way, and I'm also grateful that he secured this debate today. Can I ask if it's his contention that the changes in 95 were wrong, or the changes in 2011 were wrong? Because there are many people that have met me who feel that the 2011 changes were just too rapid.
I think a fundamental point which has been made by honourable members from the government side is the lack of notice in relation to the 1995 changes, or the failure to give any notice at all, in fact, in some cases. And there is an issue there of communication. I do believe the various groups, and there are a number of groups who are campaigning around this issue. I do believe there's a general acceptance of the need to equalise state retirement pension age. I don't think there's any dispute about that. I think we're in agreement about it. But the issue is the phasing and the acceleration of the phasing of that, the original changes from 1995. I'll give way to my own.
My old friend's making a marvellous speech, and I don't want to disagree with him. But wouldn't he agree that the equalisation of pension age for this group of women isn't fair? Because in the era that they lived, many of them had to be responsible for the children, had to undermine their career, had lower wages, didn't make allowances for the pensions, that have since suffered divorce or breakup. And many of the people coming to me in Swansea are literally becoming impoverished because of this change. It's all very well imagining a utopian world where there's equal opportunity in the future, where that would justify an equal pension age, but that isn't what's happened to these women, and it is quite wrong to say it's just about, telling them.
Absolutely, and the issue as well is falling off the end of a cliff. The lack of transitional relief to the women who were affected, and there are many examples, people who have retired, made retirement plans at 60 in order to care for elderly relatives. Women who've worked in very arduous employment, physically demanding, who really can't work beyond 60. So this is a huge injustice affecting 3.8 million women in this country that really needs to be addressed. I'm going to give way to my right honourable friend.
Well, my honourable friend has been very generous in giving way. Just to support that point, can I again quote from a woman from Knowsley who was born in June 1955. And she says, my elderly mother had a stroke and I subsequently became her full-time carer. The last 10 years of her life were particularly difficult as she needed 24-hour care provided by me. My own health has suffered greatly due to the added pressure, and I now find myself unable to work due to ill health, and at an age when I should be receiving my state pension, I'm forced to attend regular appointments at the DWP and medicals to ascertain my entitlement to ESA. This is, she says, soul-destroying.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure every member...
Honourable gentleman answers that intervention. I make no criticism whatsoever of the Honourable Gentleman for Easington, who is making a very genuine speech and has a great many points to cover, and who has taken a lot of interventions. But I do make criticism of people who have made interventions and will not then remain for the rest of this debate, because the convention is that the Honourable Gentleman introducing the debate should have approximately 15 minutes. Now, he has so far had a great deal more than that, but I'm not blaming him. He's been very decent in taking points from other people, which is good for the pace of the debate. But the people who are making interventions and who will then just leave the chamber are preventing some of the 32 people who have indicated to me that they wish to speak in this debate from having the chance to do so. So I'm asking for a bit of honour. No more interventions unless it's from people who are going to remain for the whole of the debate. And the Honourable Gentleman for Easington ought to bring his remarks to a conclusion soon, but I'm not going to pressurise him too much because it's not his fault, it's other people's fault that he's in this position. Mr. Morris.
I'm grateful for your guidance, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I will press on. I recognise many members wish to speak in the debate. This is a time-sensitive issue, and the government must understand it. I believe, as my honourable friends indicated, we need to work cross-party and find a solution. If the government aren't able to do that, I'm afraid you're going to be letting down a whole generation of women who are going to be denied a fair deal in relation to their state pension. In Easington, there are 4,542 women who are affected, and the campaign are looking for justice, not just warm words. The suggestion of early access to a pension credit made by my own front bench, is a good start and could be done immediately, but as a standalone option, doesn't take into account that all the 1950s women have suffered maladministration and a loss of income, and all deserve some recompense. The cost-neutral suggestion put forward by other honourable members of an actuarial reduced pension for life asks the women who've been discriminated against to bear the cost of putting this mistake right, which wasn't their fault in the first place. It also condemns women to retirement in pensioner poverty with all its problems of greater reliance on benefits. Arrangements that only address the additional state pension age increases imposed by the 2011 Act, again, are not good enough. There are faults with the application of the 1995 Act, and I do think that the maladministration suffered by these WASPI women is an issue that the government is going to have to address sooner or later. They need recompense, and they need to take into account a solution that will bring relief to all of the women affected. The government have repeatedly stated that it's committed to supporting people aged 50 years and over to remain in and return to work. And there are several policies and initiatives that have been put forward to support people to work for longer, such as older people's champions in job centres, lifelong learning, and apprenticeship opportunities for people of all ages. But I do think these suggestions completely disregard the issues which are at the very heart of the WASPI campaign. In reality, they are completely unworkable for the majority of WASPI women, such as the case highlighted by my honourable friend, the member for the City of Durham. May I also add, I was incredibly disappointed that the budget didn't offer any form of help, any form of relief to the WASPI women. And I do know that some of the members opposite, in all sincerity, made representations to the Chancellor, and I was very disappointed that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister didn't respond. I am rather incredulous that, the Labour Party, Her Majesty's opposition, are attacked for being weak on women's issues by the Prime Minister. So I'm curious to find out whether the Prime Minister, who I understand is a WASPI woman, did actually receive notification from the DWP about the change in pension arrangements.
Good question.
Quite simply, women born in the 1950s were not given sufficient notice by the government that their state retirement age would be increasing. And I do want to leave time for other members to make contributions. I could go on and give specific examples, but I don't intend to do that. I'm sure the members are going to give those examples. So thank you very much. I would like to move the motion on the floor.